Welcome to the Art of Service video series around cybersecurity risk management. My name is Ivanka Menken, and today's conversation is with Mr. Brian Hay. Brian is the co-founder and director of Cultural Cybersecurity, a Queensland-based business specializing in the prevention of and the preparedness for cybersecurity crime. His passion and focus is around the importance of business culture and awareness of the value of people in companies in relation to cybercrime. I will introduce Brian at the start of the interview and will let him talk about his extensive experience in fighting crime, cybercrime specifically, and fraud while being with Queensland Police. What I loved about this conversation is the emphasis of people first, that cybersecurity risk management is all about the decisions you make from a business strategy point of view, and that at the core of it, cybersecurity is a risk management exercise. If you like Brian's approach to cybersecurity and you would like to reach out to him, his website is www.culturalcybersecurity.com. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Welcome, Brian, and thank you for having a chat with me about cybersecurity. I had a look at your website, Cultural Cybersecurity, and I must say I'm intrigued. So first of all, you have a rare blend of cybersecurity skills and business attributes. You are long considered a thought leader in the world of cybersecurity, and you have learned your craft not from the technical demands of cyber industry, but rather by focusing on the activities of organized crime and cyber criminals. So you have a very colorful background: police, head of security team for, Dimension Data. And now you run your own business focusing on what I seem to understand, the cultural, the people side of cybersecurity. So please enlighten me.
Okay.
What is your version of your bio?
Oh my goodness, boy, they're just words to put together that someone introduced you to when you present at a conference or something. But I think what I'm trying to say is there, I was chair of the ANSPA's Australia-New Zealand Police Advisory Year Crime Working Group from inception for 5 years. I was on the National Cybercrime Working Group with the Federal Attorney General's Department for some years when that kicked off. I've seen the policy level and a lot of the strategy development around cybercrime from a governmental perspective. Then, of course, as a detective and operational commander at the Fraud and Cybercrime Group, I had the insights to financial crime and the consequential impact of cyber, and then the ever stronger emerging presence of cybercrime. So a lot of that focuses on two elements. One is the victim entity, the victim person, and the second, of course, is the offender themselves. And then you have what everyone typically thinks in the first instance about cybersecurity, and that's technology. So it's given me a blend of course, when I went to work with Dimension Data and then to Unisys, it gave me further insights into the whole mainstream digital economy from a cybersecurity technology perspective. And from all those things, we were very much missing out on a couple of key components, because whilst I was originally driven by services and then response to communities, and then you go into the technology sphere and it's driven by making money and profit, which is completely normal, no issue with that at all. It's not a criticism. But I think what has been forgotten along the way are a couple of things. One is that people should come first, and that's a great vulnerability we have. And the other thing that I think gets forgotten along the way is that the strategy should be led by the business. It should not be dictated by the technology. We've forgotten that technology is a tool, it's not a strategy. Yeah. And I think a lot of companies feel a great sense of assurance if the technologies they've got in place or they've purchased sit in the top right quadrant of Gartner, rather than being actually, does it reduce risk? Does it grow people? Does it meet our company needs? And there's a little bit of a false assurance process in there. And
yeah,
one of the obvious things that we've never addressed, or doesn't get addressed enough, is why. Why do we need cybersecurity? How do you assess your risk? Who are the threats? Everyone talks about the threats being the technology, the malware, the viruses, the worms, the Trojans, the APTs. They're merely the tools.
Yeah.
And they're the tools orchestrated, put together, and exploited by people. And the biggest threat group is organised crime. And the purpose of organised crime? To make money. That's the why. And so it's, you know, and then the other thing is the what. Well, what do I need to protect? And most organisations don't know really what their risk is. It's all been driven by the banter of technology giants, as opposed to a full and honest appraisal of their environment, understanding, first of all, the why, then the what, then the where, and the how. But and then if you, after all that's said and done, where do you start? And, you know, the problem is that too many strategies start with the technology they want to use because that gives them more assurance because it's being rated high, rather than doing a very honest account of their environment and looking at where the vulnerabilities are and what do they want to protect. And you know what? Everyone wants to protect their data, but what about their people? At the end of the day, that's the most important asset you've got. I think it's got lost in the whole transaction. Now, that's a whole big, long-winded speech about some of the fundamentals that you touched on before, but let's get back to basics. And the most important entity we need to protect is the people. You get the people on board, your data is going to be a lot safer.
Yeah. So you talk about the why of cybercrime and the why behind the reason for cybercrime. What is your why? Why did you get so passionate about fighting cybercrime and cybersecurity?
Okay, well, that goes back to my law enforcement days, and it's quite. It wasn't a choice. I was sitting up at the as an investigator, detective inspector, heading up the public sector corruption team at the then was called the Crime and Misconduct Commission, and I'd had enough. At that, I'd done 5 tours of duty in fighting corruption in the history of Queensland, and I needed a change. And I got a phone call one day. I was so desperate to get out that I even applied for the rural stock squad, which meant, you know, look at cattle duffing and all this sort of stuff. And I had an assistant commissioner ring me up and he said, "Brian, you didn't get the rural stock squad. What on earth were you thinking?" I said, "I just got to get out." He said, "We'd like you to come and take over the fraud squad," out of which later became known as Fraud and Cybercrime Group. And I had never thought about it before. And once I got in there, I realised that we needed a paradigm shift in the way law enforcement approaches these challenges of cybercrime and international financial crime. You know, when I'd first joined the Queensland Police, you could stand on the borders of Queensland, turn your back on the rest of the world and say, "This is my patch, I've got to protect it." But with the advent of the internet, there are no geographical borders. Yet law enforcement, legislation, politicians, they still think and respond in terms of geographical boundaries. Yep. I don't think the thinking's elevated yet to the standard it needs to do to understand how we approach these things. And so I took on a paradigm shift of focusing, how do we actually, I remember presenting at an international FBI conference. You know, my commissioner was sitting in the front line of the audience, and I didn't clear this statement with him first. But I said, law enforcement needs to adopt a willingness to contribute without expectation of return. And what I mean that is you've got to pay it forward. You've got to work internationally, collaboratively, and we've got to give other countries intelligence to allow them to do their job. So a traditional response is, if someone offends against a member of your community, you do the investigation, you put in together a brief, and then you go, and if that person's outside your jurisdiction, you look to extradite them back so you can prosecute them. Yeah. Now, one of the things we saw with cybercrime and the internet was that it went from a high value, low volume crime type to high volume, low value. So no one's going to pursue an extradition process for $5,000, $2,000, $200. That would only get, once it gets into the millions, will they actually do it? Because it's a very expensive exercise. But if you're able to share information with the agencies around the world, well, it gives them an insight what they need to do, and they can pull all that information together to form a picture, then take action. For example, if we had 50 victims in Queensland, 20 victims in New South Wales, all for $200 each, and then across the other states and territories. That's still going to assemble itself to several $1,000s, but not of significance. But what if they're multiplying that by the factor of 500, all the other populations around the world? And all that money was going back to, say, London. Now, do we have 5 to 8 agencies in this country pursuing individual investigations, or do we actually harness the energy of intelligence and give it to the agency in London that can centralise it all? Imagine every country did that. Then all of a sudden, the people in the UK have a far greater picture of what's going on. Now, the question gets asked, will they pursue a prosecution, then an extradition, and fly in witnesses from all over the world? And of course, that's not a cost-effective exercise either. But you know what? A country like that is going to have wealth creation provisions. It's going to have proceeds of crime legislation. It's going to have tax evasion offences, and it's going to have money laundering offences. And let me give you an insight. You get done for a hack in this country, you might be looking at 3 to 5 years as a top line. That's off the book, which no one ever gets anyway. But money laundering carries 20 years.
Wow.
So what's the purpose of organised crime? To make money. What do they value most? Making money. So if you can actually centralise it and have another country, because you've worked with them, provide them information, take more effective action using the tools at their disposal and enable them to be more effective against the criminal environment, then you're going to make a difference. Yeah. Now, that's a very, very long story, and I apologise for it.
No, but that has a really big assumption as well, that countries work together towards a similar goal. Whereas there's different jurisdictions, and like you say, you started off with Queensland is separate from New South Wales, is separate from Victoria, so that's a really big maturity journey to go from each to their own to we have to work together to make a difference and to be able to fight this type of cybercrimes. My question is, how does that translate to the commercial sector? Because my assumption is that with countries, even though there may be some reluctance, there's still that overarching governance idea. But when you talk about commercial entities, they could be competitors, or they could be in the same industry. So how does that, because you've made that jump from the police force into the commercial sector, how does that approach to fighting cybercrime translate into the commercial sector?
Yeah, look, there's a number of issues, right? The commercial sector is there to make money, but also has a social responsibility, a corporate responsibility. I think you've seen a lot more collaboration in cyberspace in the commercial environment over the last decade. I think, if you have the Global Cyber Alliance, that's sharing the pooling of threat intelligence. And in the main, the private sector has been has been far more mature in the main. And I think that's where a lot of collaboration. They're doing more things that law enforcement and government agencies can learn from.
Is that because there's a direct financial impact, whereas with countries there's more of the political cloud around it all?
Absolutely. Make no mistake, bottom line, it's about getting your brand out there, being positive and doing stuff. But it's about doing things smarter and being more effective, and they're more competitive. And so it's and they actually hold more of the data. Law enforcement is not at the front line; it's a response. I always said if we have to arrest someone, it means the crime's already been committed. The purity of cybersecurity, or is that it's crime prevention in its focus. It actually wants to stop it. And there's the other anomaly is that we don't know. No one knows how much cybercrime occurs because most of it isn't reported.
Yeah.
So the front line is the industry, and I always saw that a couple of things. When I left the Queensland Police, I straight away was stripped of the border restrictions. There's more innovation, no doubt, in the private sector than there is in the world of government, and so there's more opportunities, and the thinking is more expansive. And sure, there's can be a selfish motivation to that thinking process, but they're open to new ideas and thinking. So protection's a good thing. I remember there was a senior detective's quote, which I found incredulous. It was, we're going to arrest our way to prevention. Like, what a lot of nonsense. But that was the mindset, and that's sort of, I thought, you've got to be kidding me. And that is absolutely ridiculous. Prevention is the essence of successful policing, because you're enabling the community to protect themselves, reduce the opportunities for criminal offenders, and therefore having less negative consequences on our communities.
Yeah.
And
is that the reason why you focus so much on people first? Like it's the education and awareness of people to be able to prevent being a victim of cybercrime, or what's the link there?
Well, there's several links. One is, I've always been, prevention focused in policing. I think it's tantamount to success. The other thing is, I think, let me put, let's be realistic. I've started my own company of the purpose to be successful, and that means making money. And I think there's a vast opportunity, because that's where the gap is around the people. It's something that I'm passionate about, and my business partner is passionate about it. And how do we actually add value to companies and go in there and make their organisations safer? Because there are no scruples by the cyber criminals, and I've seen examples where they have targeted children of family members to get to an entity. So there's a lot of apathy that people think cybersecurity is only at work. We in this country have had the internet 25 years. We've only got our first piece of legislation in February this year that said you've got to report a mandatory data breach compliance legislation. We're 25 years behind the crooks. So they've been exploiting it virtually from day one, and we've got a lot of catch up to do. And as I said, there's apathy that you've got to be secure at work, but at home it doesn't matter. Well, where do you think the crooks are going to go to? They're going to go to the house with the open window. And if we're not teaching our kids, our grandparents, our brothers, sisters, uncles, aunties how to protect themselves, well, who is going to? And so one of the things when we work with a company is not just to focus on the security or the behaviour of people at work, but we take that to their behaviours in the home. Because, as I said, I have examples where crooks have targeted the home environment to get to the work environment, and that will continue.
Yeah, and you're not talking dark web or that's it. So you're talking day-to-day internet that people use on a daily basis to do their work, to do their schoolwork, to just as part of everyday living.
Absolutely. So if I go into someone's Facebook profile and they're a person that, they hold a manager of a certain, say, manager of finance in their job title on LinkedIn. So then I go from their LinkedIn profile, I know what they look like. If there's a photograph there, I know who they work for, where they're educated, their past resume and work history. So I can now go to their Facebook page. I start to look at who's who in the zoo, how many family members, how many kids. I go there are photographs there embedded into those photographs. I'm mildly confident most people do not turn off the location settings on their phone when they take those photographs. So in the metadata is the GPS coordinates of exactly where they live. If I look further in photographs in the background, I see there's a Pro Heart painting on the wall, solid timber, furniture, big screen TV.
Ding, 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 ding.
You know what I'm saying? And of course, they're saying the fact that next week the whole family's going on a wonderful vacation on a cruise around the South Pacific Islands. Beautiful. I know now where you live. I know what furniture you've financially profiled yourself. Now, if I want to do a tangible crime, that is real world, as in you can touch it, well, then there's potential for break and enters. And again, I could tell you some horrible stories that I wouldn't want to go into, but you can have far more physically damaging side effects as well. But now, for example, if I know, let me go a little bit left field of that, I know that you're into quarter horse racing, and it's your passion. So I'm sitting back as a cyber crook, and maybe it's one of your children are in a quarter horses. And all of a sudden I introduce myself, I develop a fake profile. I'm saying I'm vice president of them for Wyoming Quarter Horse Association, put all that out there, put some photos. I reach out on Facebook. I hear you got a love of quarter horses. Do you want a thing? I'm socially engineering you. You say yes, we connect up. Then I say, have a look at my latest stallion. Just got him, really good. He started up great bloodlines. You click on the photo, which I embedded a 0-day exploit, and now I own your machine. Very simply. Now, now I own, say, the child's machine. Now, a parent is going to be less vigilant about what they accept and download from their child, are they not? As opposed to if it was from a stranger. So now if I can own the child's machine, I send them a zero-day exploit to their parent who was my primary target to get into a certain organization, and you see how you can follow this. And we're not prepared for that.
No.
And what is it all about? It's about people. Giving ourselves, we teach our kids from the time they can walk, and we teach them how to cross a road safely. We teach them how to play in the sandpit with other kids. We teach them how to share toys. We teach them to show their elders respect. We teach them how to use a knife and fork at the table, but we throw them an iPad as a babysitting device. And we've never been taught ourselves the fundamentals of how to be safe online, and we've got Buckley's end of teaching that to our kids, and we think our education system's going to solve all those problems for it. Well, guess what? The teachers haven't been taught either. So we're in this vacuum of 25 years, and I often use the analogy of the motor vehicle. Modern motor car arguably started in 1886. Worst consequence? Road death. It took in this country nearly 100 years to get the road toll steadily declining. And it's a whole, and there's a lot of parallels and lessons to be learned in that process. But the big catch-up, where we can, if you look at the vulnerabilities around statistically around organisations, I think some that suggest 91% of most breaches occur through phishing emails. There's, if you look at, I think the first 63 reports of mandatory data breach in the first 6 weeks of the legislation coming into effect, I think was only 7% was attributed to technical failure. The rest was people behaviour.
Wow.
Let's get back to the basics. Let's focus on the most important asset we possess. It's not the data. It's not our systems or the tools. It's our people. So when we talk about building...
But isn't that a way to get to the data? Isn't the data the ultimate goal?
Of course. Yeah, but through our people.
Yeah.
We think we got to put the systems in place. That's our first line of defense. It's not our first line of defense, is people.
Yeah.
Giving them the tools they need to actually make it safer for themselves. And they are becoming targets. I often say in front of audiences, if you've got a director or manager or director an executive in your job description, you're a bigger target. You are. We're all being profiled constantly.
Yeah. So how do you not get paranoid? I mean, you've been in this industry for 35 years, so you've seen the dark side of society, probably way more than you ever wanted to see. So how do you not get really paranoid about everything?
Someone told me once, many, many years ago when I was joining the police, I said, you'll become very old and cynical. And, I've never had greater faith in humanity. I think our communities are fantastic. I think that 99% of people always try to do the right thing. We have a wonderful culture in Australia. We actually do look after people, each other pretty well. And we hear these horrible stories of that not happening, but in the main it does. And I think it's about, I used to say, take a little pill called cynicism. And if you understand that you will be approached, and if you know how to protect yourself or have a better idea, you're less likely to get caught. So it's not about being cynical, it's just being aware that, okay, look at all the wonderful opportunities technology offers us today. The digitization, the social media and all that, it's brilliant. It's not about not using it, but no one's ever said, okay, let's become aware of it. You wouldn't put your 15-year-old son or daughter behind the wheel of the car for the first time and say, here you go, have a go at driving.
Yeah, have fun.
Exactly.
Make good choices.
Exactly. So it's not about being cynical. I'm actually all for technology and the advantage it can present. It's about being aware, and that's a big difference. Yeah.
So on the back of that, what do you feel is the biggest myth about cybersecurity?
That you can have zero exploits, and that your risk tolerance is zero. We got a zero risk tolerance for cybersecurity. As I say to people, I say, okay, did you drive here today? Yes. You're going to drive home. Can you guarantee me you're not going to have a car accident? And they say, no, don't be ridiculous. So I'll say, exactly. So why do you expect zero tolerance for cyber incidents? It's not possible. And so there's that is complete mythology. There's no such thing as absolute protection. Why? Because we have people involved from all. Excuse me, that's my dog.
That's your protection. It's all good.
Sorry. So you're never going to be absolute. It's about how you manage. Cyber security is a risk management exercise.
Yeah.
It is about understanding the risks, being aware, and then managing the processes. Sorry, that's my diabetic no-eyed chihuahua that's being very aggressive at the front door. She's beautiful, but so
the joys of working from home.
yes. So it's a I think the biggest myth is that you can be protected. So the other thing that people don't correlate very well to is the incident response component. They think, oh, we only need that at the if something bad happens. Well, you know what? The reality is there will be those accidents.
Yeah.
And there's now research that shows that, as I saw the other day, if you can actually find out within 30 days of a breach that's occurred, you can actually reduce your cost by up to $1 million. And so investment in preparedness is akin to more successful business.
Yeah. So it's really identifying your vulnerabilities, identifying the types of threats you might be open to, and have a preparedness program, a strategy to work on it if and when things happen.
To a point. And it goes back to the very first thing you said there was about identifying the vulnerabilities. The biggest vulnerability of people, it's the last thing being addressed. Why is that? There's a couple of reasons for that. From a culture perspective, we've grown up on the diet of the technology companies telling you got to have us, we're going to save you, and we're trying to we believe we can solve human behaviors through technical applications. Well, guess what? Today it hasn't worked. And so most organizations actually don't understand the vulnerabilities. They rely upon those technical conversations from a technical IT perspective. That, we've identified that technical breach, we can solve it with this technology. But hang on, what about the people factor? What about the human behaviors? Have we fixed those yet? And you've got to have a human-based approach to it. You've got to look at the culture, and the culture is going to be, I think, a very big that's going to fill a lot of your gaps. And when I talk about, what are your vulnerabilities? Well, that's a really interesting thing. It's like asking, what data do you want to protect? And I spoke to this gentleman one day and I said, what data do you want to protect? I asked him that question. He said, well, I want to protect my merger and acquisition information, the board papers. I want to protect resource stock listings. I want to do this and do this and do this. I said, is that it? Yep, that's it. He said, you sure about that? Yep, that's it. I said, okay. I said, how many people do you employ? He said, 5,000. I said, okay. I said, and you've got HR files on them? Yes, of course. With all their personal details and all their next of kin personal details? Yep. And I said, well, and you pay them by electronic bank transfer? Yes. So you've got their bank account details? Yep. And you've got all their tax file numbers? Yes. I said, and you've got their superannuation details? Yes. And I said, no doubt there'll be some automatic payment deductions from the payroll system goes into other providers that they have, bank account, or, telephone, health insurance, or anything like that. Yeah. But by this, you could see where I was going. And I said, if you gave me that profile, I said, I could probably make $30,000 to $50,000 out of each identity if you gave me all that information. And I said, it's not what data you think's important, but what data your adversary thinks is important, because that makes you the target.
Yeah.
Okay. We keep thinking from the technology perspective. What motivates a criminal to do certain things? What actually would make a criminal look at you or your organization as being a target? And now it's the art of war. Know your enemy.
Yeah.
So the more you put out about yourself, the bigger you promote yourself online in your business title and all this sort of stuff, and you post out, wow, we just had a great win, won the lotto, or, you just imagine. What we never thought is that we're actually giving the crooks a reason to target us. And about understanding how they act, why they will act, we can better prepare ourselves.
Yeah. So as a business, because you just mentioned, like, we focus on technology, we focus on corporate documentation, we focus on the business side, and forget the fact that that there's people involved as well. So what would be the biggest risk that we as business owners face at the moment? And I'm talking not just the large organizations, but also the medium to small organizations from a cyber crime point of view?
Oh, from the crooks, well, and see,
because it's so easy to think, oh, a big organization, like Dimension Data, because that's where you came from. They have so much information, they have so many employees, they have, there's so much data that can be extracted that is valuable in one way, shape, or form. I'm not even talking BHP Billiton, because that's even bigger. But what about a small to medium business owner with 10 to 20 staff that is really sort of flying under the radar most of the time and running their business? What is the biggest risk they face?
They face the biggest risk of all. Okay, they may not
lose. You would say that. That's why I asked the question.
They're not losing the terabytes of data, but they haven't spent the millions of dollars to secure their systems and processes. And they haven't invested in the cultural programs to actually protect the behavior of their people. They're the soft underbelly. And we're seeing SMEs being attacked every single day, and it's going to occur in larger quantities. What you've all got to understand too is, when you look at organised crime in the cyber criminal environments, fundamentally speaking, you're looking at a pyramid. And up the top of that pyramid are the smaller numbers of entities that can do highly skilled, covert cybercrime operations. They're not massive. And what they do is, in their business model, is they now perform services for other criminals. And if you imagine, say there were 5...
multi-level marketing for crooks.
Exactly what it is. Absolutely. And of course, at your entry point at the lower level, anyone can go in and just buy every aspect of cybercrime as a service or as a product or as a commodity. You don't need to have any technical skills these days to get into cybercrime and make a lot of money. But what it means is you have the vast number of your cyber criminal players today are not targeting the massive enterprises. They're coming after the SMBs because they're softer, faster, smaller targets. And they can hit more in one go. So a ransomware attack, has gone from maybe on a higher entity, it's going to be $1 million, but they've invested a lot of time in that to get there, and it needs really high skills, and they've put it in. But most of your crooks are going to be operating at the lower level, so they're going for the faster turnarounds, a smaller target, and something they can convert to cash quickly. So the SMEs are absolutely the soft underbelly.
Yeah.
And they're not prepared for it.
No, so how can we help them be prepared for that? What can a business owner do to be prepared for that, to understand their risk?
Okay, you raise that question, understand your risk. Well, let's go back to the fundamentals that cybersecurity is business responsibility. It's not an IT issue. Okay, but then we look at where is the business going? What is the purpose of the business? What's your direction, your growth strategy? What do you want to be and what do you want to achieve? How are you going to deliver your business outcomes? Then conduct a risk assessment. Now, from that purpose of how you're going to operate, where you're going to go, then you can look at, okay, how do we reduce risk? And then you make a determination around how much digitization is involved, where do you keep your data, how do you keep your data? And then we look at culture. Go back to culture. I always like to put culture first, but business will want to talk about business outcomes first. And then grow your people. Not only, 3 elements to it to me is cyber safety, high performance, and digital transforming. So changes the normative value in today's digital technology world. So then, and only after you've looked at the business outcome, direction, risk, and people, then you say, right, what technologies do we need? So everything to date has been, here's the technology, it's the latest, the greatest, it'll solve all your problems, buy it and patch it and put it in and take it on. So we'll turn it upside down. So how does business going to make it successful? Let's do a risk assessment with your people, and then give consideration to what technologies need. Now, the reality is we're going to see more, I think, migration, as we have seen over time, to managed security services on the basis of it's such a sophisticated, complex environment, and you just want one that's going to help you grow your business. Because why? You know where you want to go. And you've got to consult with your cybersecurity provider to make sure the solution you're getting is not about the technology today, but there's a bit of a strategic sense about where the technology is going, and therefore the attacks, because the crooks are the first entities to reverse engineer any new technologies. There was a very interesting study with University of New South Wales in a graph that I saw. And when the technology comes out, the first adopters are the criminals, because they want to reverse engineer it, look for vulnerabilities, find ways to exploit it, because they want to make money out of it. So a small, an SME is, you don't have to spend lots of money, understand your business, get a good sense of appreciation of your risks, protect your people, let them protect you, and straight away you can reduce that risk landscape by 90% by having a skilled workforce who is cybersecurity aware. And that's not being technically aware, that's being just online.
Aware.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, your risk has gone way down because you've got people on board with you, and they're going to be there, your eyes and ears, and give alerts. Yeah. And I was talking to someone this morning, and they said, and there are 17 people in the office, and they said, we talk a lot, we share information, and so if one person sees an email they're suspicious about, they don't try to make that decision always by themselves. They'll chat about it and come and have a look at this. That's a community. That's supporting each other. And sadly, there's too many SMEs out there, or SMBs, that think, oh, we're too small to be bothered with. No crook's going to come over us. That is the biggest mistake you can possibly make. Or a line of business that thinks, oh, we wouldn't be of interest to cyber. We're only, I saw something just recently on a plastic surgery business that got hacked and then extorted. And of course, that business will be out of date inside 6 months because of certain events that took place and what it chose to do or not to do. And its reputation will absolutely go down the toilet. And they're not thinking of it. So I would come back, where is your business going? What is your appetite for risk? Grow your people. And once you've got those three elements done, say, rightio, how do we get on board with the right security partner? And I say partner, not provider, not seller, not vendor, security partner. And I talk to people and I say, look, I'm not interested in you selling your stuff one-off. I'm interested in being partnered with you on a journey to help you grow and be successful tomorrow, not transactionally here today. And that's where one of the biggest criticisms I see with the vendor community is it's too transactional in its thinking, because they got budgets to hit and it's all about the sale. It's not about the purpose, not about the why.
No, and ultimately it is a partnership, because you're going hand in hand to a shared common enemy.
Absolutely. And that's it. It's you just nailed it. We're all in this together. Everybody's responsibility. It's just as much the CFO, the CRO, the CMO, the CEO as is the CIO to the CISO.
The C something O.
as to the person and the dispatch doc that's signing for the receipt of the whatever comes in the loading bay. Absolutely, it's everybody's responsibility.
So how do you see this in the future? What trend do you see developing? I mean, we have the GDPR regulation going into effect next week, Friday. I mean, that's a big thing. Although to me, it's a big thing. I'm not sure if it's a big thing for everybody. But how do you see that moving forward? Like you said, 25 years of internet in Australia, cybercrime is definitely picking up. It is not just for big organizations. Small to medium enterprises and businesses need to be aware of that. What's next? What's the trend? How can we future-proof our business?
Yeah, okay. So first of all, I think now that we've opened the door to our politicians to solve our cybercrime problems, that door will never close. There's one thing I know from working in government for all those years is that the solution to all the problems is make new legislation or more new regulations. I think as we have more high-profile hacks get reported or data losses, we will get something that will tickle the media's fancy. They'll make a big song and dance about it. Some politician who wants to get on another soapbox is going to get out there and make a statement, oh, we will do this and we will hold them accountable. We'll see the emergence of new legislation. But
like you said before, that's looking in the rearview mirror. That's not preventative.
But that's history telling us what's going to happen. You asked me, where do I think things are going? I think we're going to a more regulated environment and force compliance upon people. If you ask me from From a cybercrime threat perspective, how do I see it going? That's probably a little bit different. We will continue to see the migration of more tangible. Why on earth would I go rob a 7-Eleven for $27.50, a packet of cigarettes and 2 cans of Red Bull, risk going to jail for 7 years, when I can go online in 30 minutes, make $5,000 as a cyber criminal extorting someone else? So we will see more migration of traditional street crime into the cyber environment. So it's not going away anytime soon. As you touched on, we're going to see more and more attention given to the SMEs, and we're going to see it into the individuals in the family. We're going to see, I think, more personal extortions. I think we've had a situation where a lot of people have shared a lot of personal data out there online. I think that's going to come back, and people will pay not to have that made public because it's emotional. I think, sadly, when we see some, cyber terrorism, it's something I think is going to be in the horizon. It's being, put out there. If you're Iranian, you'd say you've already been victim of cyber terrorism anyway, with the Stuxnet attack on the nuclear facility. I think we'll see, sadly, more significant events take place before.
And you mean significant event on utility style?
I think utilities, yeah. I think we're going to see stuff that gets everyone's attention. Yeah. Seriously gets everyone's attention. I remember addressing a counterterrorism, doing a lecture on a counterterrorism course, maybe about 10 years ago. And I said, well, in First World War, whoever controlled the land and the sea won. In the Second World War, whoever controlled the air won. I said, does that mean the next time we go to war, it's going to whoever controls the internet wins? And I don't think we're going to be far from that. And when you look at how everything, we're seeing more and more IT overlay on the operating technologies, because it saves money and there's a lot of efficiencies being gained, but it carries risk. What we're seeing today is the inside what we're going to see in the future. It's going to get a lot worse. Sadly, we have a lot of apathy until something tragic happens, and it's just going to be one of those things. And I'm not professing to have a crystal ball or anything like that, but I can see. Maybe I've just got a warped mind, but I can still see so many ways for a criminal to make money. And when I see the apathy and issues, like I saw a report today that Australia has lost $350 million in the last 12 months to fraud and scams. Well, where are most of those scams happening today? They're happening online. Why is it we still have our communities still send hundreds of $millions to crooks overseas and scams to Nigeria, to Ghana? It's and we think even then when you get education, this is the challenge with people, right? We're pretty unique animals. I remember I did a lot of work on Nigerian scams, and we had more arrests affected in Nigeria than I think any other country in the world by working with them and paying it forward and sharing intelligence. And at a point in time, and I started looking into why is it those senior citizens in our communities who are now behind those keyboards so vulnerable to these sorts of things. We think it's because they're more trusting. In actual fact, there's been a university in Iowa that did a lot of research into that, and it's part of the frontal cortex responsible for cynicism and doubt. And as we get older, that part of the brain starts to deteriorate. And what they found doing these control studies, which those that showed more marked deterioration, that part of the frontal cortex, was twice as likely to fall victim for a scam.
Wow.
So maybe the problem is not always behavior, then it becomes, it's actually physiological. And so our defenses then have to change, and that goes down a whole different path. So it's not simplistic. And a lot of technology companies would like you to think that you buy a technology going to save the world. But we live in 1,000 shades of grey and multitudes of colour. But we've got to come back to ourselves. So where are the criminals going to go? It's going to get worse. They're going to target more and more individuals. They're going to be more exploitive. I remember, and show you how nasty they can get. I know someone who received a photograph of their child and was said, "Pay me $5,000 or I'll ruin their online reputation for the rest of their life." Okay, so what would you do? You know, and it's going to get more personal, and it's going to get ugly.
Yeah.
And the amount of data that is being stored out there by each and every one of us is quite alarming. You know,
Yeah.
it's just time for a refresh. The sky's not falling. The world's a beautiful place and it's full of wonderful people. But it's about knowing our enemy. And to date, our enemy has been pretty silent in many respects and unknown and faceless. Does it really matter what country they come from or what their first name is at this point in time? If we can actually take steps to keep them outside the locked door, then that's fantastic.
Yeah.
But we just got to be told what those skill sets are as a starting point. And when we do have that accident, how do we respond more quickly?
And share that information so that other people know what's going on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. You know, with too much that time, the information is power. We'll know what it's information is shared is benefit. And you know, at the moment, people don't like to talk. We've been forced into silos because we're worried about the brand and reputation harm that comes as a consequence. And now we've got legislations. If you don't report, you're going to get fined. And if you do report, you're going to be reviewed. And so there's my dog again. Look, I think we're privileged to be working in this part of an organisation. I shouldn't say this part of this industry where we can actually make a positive difference to people.
Yeah.
And it's actually, even though, you know, you don't join the police, let me tell you, it's for the money. You do it because you've got a sense of service. And working in the security industry, you still have that wonderful sense of service that you can actually still contribute to make a positive difference on people's lives and families. And as long as you never lose sight of that, I think it will be a great place.
Oh, fantastic. Well, thank you so much for sharing your views. And I love the way you focus on the people side of things and the culture in not just in organizations, but in families and societies as a whole. Because, you know, the time is behind us that we can put our head in the sand and just pretend it's not happening, because it's all around us. It's everywhere. And I love the fact that you're focusing on the people side and not so much on the technology side. So thank you so much for your time and sharing your knowledge.
Thank you very much. And I know I rabbit on a bit, so I do apologise for that, but I just get passionate about it. And
I love it. Love it.
If we can make a difference, then it's been a good day.
Yeah.